I was halfway through my third cup of coffee when I saw the tow truck hauling away my F-350 through the living room window. And I knew immediately that Patricia Henderson had finally crossed a line she couldn't uncross. The blizzard had started 6 hours earlier, around 3 in the morning, dumping what the Weather Service was calling a historic amount of snow across northern Minnesota. I lived in Maple Ridge Estates, a planned community just outside Duluth that had been built 15 years ago with strict HOA regulations and even stricter enforcers. My name is Quentin Norris, and I had owned my house here for 8 years, running a private snow removal business that served most of the surrounding areas. My massive plow truck, a diesel beast with an 8-foot blade attachment, was my livelihood. It was also, according to Patricia and her band of HOA enforcers, an eyesore that violated community standards. I grabbed my phone and pulled up the group text that had been going off since dawn. Patricia had sent approximately 37 messages in the HOA board chat, each one more hysterical than the last. The roads were impassable. The main entrance was blocked. Emergency vehicles couldn't get through. Someone needed to do something immediately. But the message that made my blood boil was the one she had sent at 7:15 a.m., just 20 minutes before my truck disappeared. Quentin's commercial vehicle has been parked in his driveway in violation of Section 12.4 of the community bylaws. Towing company has been contacted. This is unacceptable during a state of emergency. I threw on my boots and coat, storming out into the snow that was still coming down in thick, heavy sheets. My driveway was empty except for my personal SUV, which was completely snowed in. The tracks from the tow truck were already filling in with fresh powder. I pulled out my phone and called the number I had for Riverside Towing, the company that had the contract with our HOA. "Yeah, we got a truck from your address about 20 minutes ago," the dispatcher confirmed. HOA president authorized the tow. "It's at our impound lot on Highway 53. In the middle of a blizzard. Are you kidding me?" "Just following orders, sir. You can retrieve it once you pay the towing and storage fees. That'll be $450. I hung up and immediately called Patricia. She answered on the first ring, her voice dripping with false sweetness. "Quentin, I assume you're calling about your truck. You had my truck towed during a blizzard, during a state of emergency. What is wrong with you?" The bylaws are very clear about commercial vehicles being stored on residential property. I've warned you multiple times. You signed an agreement when you purchased your home that you would abide by all community standards. I could feel the rage building in my chest. "Patricia, that truck is how I make my living. I have a dozen clients who are expecting me to clear their properties today. There's 2 feet of snow on the ground and more coming. Perhaps you should have thought about that before repeatedly violating community regulations. The board voted last month to implement stricter enforcement. This is your 4th violation this year." "My 4th violation. I got warnings for having my garbage cans visible from the street and for planting the wrong color flowers in my front garden. This is insane. Rules are rules, Quentin. Now, if you'll excuse me, I have more pressing matters to attend to. The community is in crisis, and I need to focus on solutions." She hung up before I could respond. I stood there in my driveway, snow accumulating on my shoulders, staring at the empty space where my truck should have been. The irony wasn't lost on me. Patricia had just removed the one piece of equipment in the entire neighborhood that could actually solve the crisis she was so worried about. My phone rang. It was Dennis Murray, one of my regular clients who lived about 3 miles away in a different subdivision. "Quentin, man, I hate to bother you, but the county plows haven't made it out here yet, and my wife is supposed to get to the hospital for her shift. Any chance you can swing by? "Dennis, I've got a situation. The HOA had my truck towed. I'm going to have to reschedule everyone until I can get it back." There was a long pause. "They towed your plow truck during this storm." "That's exactly what they did." "That's the dumbest thing I've ever heard. Good luck, man. Let me know if you need anything." I made 7 more calls just like that one, apologizing to clients and explaining the situation. By the time I finished, I was standing in my garage, trying to figure out how I was going to get to the impound lot when the roads were completely buried. The county had issued a travel advisory warning people to stay home unless absolutely necessary. Even if I could dig out my SUV, the roads in our neighborhood were impassable. My neighbor Mike Rodriguez came trudging through the snow, his face red from the cold and exertion. "Hey Quentin, I just heard what happened. Patricia is out of her mind." "You got that right. Listen, there's going to be an emergency board meeting in an hour at Patricia's house. A bunch of us are going to walk over there and demand they do something about these roads. You should come." I'm not sure I trust myself to be in the same room as her right now. "I get it, but you should be there. People need to hear your side of this." I agreed, mostly because I wanted to see Patricia try to explain her logic in front of the other residents. The walk to her house, which was in the center of the development, took nearly 30 minutes through knee-deep snow. By the time we arrived, there were already 15 people crammed into her living room, all of them looking cold, tired, and angry. Patricia stood at the front of the room with her clipboard, her perfectly styled blonde hair not moving despite the chaos of the morning. She was 52 years old, had never worked a day in her life thanks to her husband's insurance business, and had dedicated the last decade to making everyone in Maple Ridge Estates as miserable as possible. "Thank you all for coming," she began, her voice taking on that condescending tone she used in all official HOA matters. "As you know, we're facing an unprecedented weather emergency. The county has informed me that their plows are focused on main roads and highways, and it may be another 12 to 24 hours before they reach our development. So what are we supposed to do?" Someone called out from the back. "Some of us have to get to work." "My daughter has medication that needs to be picked up from the pharmacy." "I'm working on solutions," Patricia said, but her voice had lost some of its confidence. "I've contacted several snow removal companies, but they're all overwhelmed with requests. The earliest anyone can get here is possibly Thursday. Thursday, it's Monday morning, that's 3 days from now. I'm doing everything I can." That's when I spoke up. "You could start by giving me back my plow truck." The room went silent. Everyone turned to look at me, then back at Patricia. Her face flushed red. "Your vehicle was in violation of community bylaws. That's a separate issue." "No, Patricia, it's the same issue. You had the one truck in this entire neighborhood that could clear these roads towed away at 7 in the morning. And now you're standing here telling everyone that help might not come for 3 days. Do you understand how insane that is? The bylaws clearly state that commercial vehicles are not permitted to be stored on residential property. Section 12.4, subsection B. You agreed to these terms." Mike stood up. "Patricia, come on. Quentin has been parking that truck in his driveway for 8 years. Nobody cared until you became HOA president. Previous boards were lax in enforcement. I was elected to restore order and maintain property values. If we start making exceptions, the entire system falls apart." An older woman named Margaret Chen raised her hand. "I hate to agree with this approach, but can we table the discussion about rules and focus on the immediate crisis? Quentin, if you had your truck, could you clear the main roads in the development?" "Absolutely. It would take me maybe 6 hours to do a complete pass of every street, including the entrance and the cul-de-sacs. "And how much would you charge for that?" Patricia asked, her eyes narrowing. I saw the trap immediately. "I charge $150 an hour for commercial work like this." So about $900, plus the cost of fuel and wear on the equipment. Call it $1,000 even. Patricia's expression turned triumphant. The HOA budget doesn't have funds allocated for snow removal. That expense would need to be approved by a vote of the full board, which can't happen until our next scheduled meeting in 2 weeks. 2 weeks? "Patricia, this is an emergency," Mike said. "I don't make the rules." The bylaws require a quorum of board members to approve any expenditure over $500. 2 of our board members are currently out of state and can't physically attend a meeting. I felt my jaw clench. So let me get this straight. You had my truck towed because of some rule that nobody has enforced in years, and now you won't allow the HOA to hire me to clear the roads because of a different rule about spending money. Do I have that right? I follow the bylaws as written. If you have a problem with that, you're welcome to run for the board in the next election. The meeting devolved into chaos after that. People were shouting over each other, demanding solutions that Patricia clearly didn't have. Someone suggested that everyone with a snowblower could work together to clear at least a path on the main road, but there were only 3 snowblowers in the entire development, and the snow was too deep for them to be effective. After an hour of going in circles, people started giving up and trudging back to their homes. I walked back with Mike and his wife Sandra. They were both furious. "This is ridiculous," Sandra said. "My mother lives alone on the other side of the development. She's 83 years old. What if she has an emergency?" "Patricia doesn't care about emergencies," I said. "She cares about rules and control." When I got home, I called the towing company again and confirmed what I already knew. The impound lot was on Highway 53, about 12 miles away. Even if I could somehow get my SUV out of the driveway and onto the road, there was no way I was making it 12 miles through unplowed streets. I was stuck. My truck was stuck, and the entire neighborhood was paying the price for Patricia's ego. The snow finally stopped around 2 in the afternoon, leaving Maple Ridge Estates under nearly 30 inches of accumulation. I spent the rest of the day monitoring my phone and watching the neighborhood group chat descend into madness. People were posting photos of their buried cars, complaints about being unable to get to work, and increasingly angry messages directed at Patricia. She responded to none of them. That evening, my phone rang with an unknown number. I almost didn't answer, but something made me pick up. "Mr. Norris, this is Amanda Chen. I'm Margaret Chen's daughter. I'm a paralegal with Morrison and Associates in Duluth." "Okay." My mother called me about what happened today. "I did some research into your HOA bylaws, and I think you might have grounds for a lawsuit. The section about commercial vehicles includes an exemption for vehicles that are actively being used for business purposes and are properly maintained. There's also a clause about reasonable accommodation during emergencies. I signed away my rights when I bought the house, didn't I?" "Not exactly. HOA bylaws can't override state and federal law. Minnesota has specific statutes about the limits of HOA authority, especially during declared emergencies. The governor issued a state of emergency declaration at 6 this morning, a full hour before your truck was towed." I felt a spark of hope. "So what do I do?" "Document everything. Save all texts, emails, and communications. Take photos of the current conditions. Get statements from neighbors if possible. Then call me tomorrow and we'll discuss your options." I spent the next 2 hours doing exactly that. I took photos of my buried driveway, the impassable streets, and the empty space where my truck should have been. I screenshot every message in the HOA group chat, including Patricia's smug announcement about the towing. I even recorded a video walking through the neighborhood, narrating the conditions and explaining what had happened. Around 9 p.m., my phone started blowing up again. Patricia had sent a message to the entire HOA distribution list. Due to the ongoing emergency, the board is requesting volunteers who own appropriate equipment to assist with snow clearing operations. Any residents willing to help should contact me immediately. I stared at the message in disbelief. She was asking for volunteers to do the exact work she had prevented me from doing. My phone buzzed with a direct text from her. "Quentin, I know we had a disagreement earlier, but I'm hoping we can put that aside for the good of the community. If you can retrieve your truck, would you be willing to volunteer your time to clear the main roads? It would go a long way toward rebuilding good faith with the board." I read the message 3 times, each time feeling my anger rise. She wanted me to get my truck, which would cost me $450 and require somehow getting to an impound lot 12 miles away, then donate my time, fuel, and equipment where to fix a problem she had created. The audacity was breathtaking. I typed out a response, deleted it, typed another one, deleted that too. Finally, I settled on something simple. "No," her response came back immediately. "I'm disappointed by your lack of community spirit. This isn't about our personal disagreement. People are suffering." "You're right. People are suffering because you had my truck towed during a blizzard. You created this problem. You fix it. I'm trying to fix it. That's why I'm reaching out to you. For free. You want me to fix your mistake for free." There was a long pause before her next message. "The HOA budget constraints are real. I can't authorize payment without board approval, but I'm sure the community would be very grateful for your assistance. Gratitude doesn't pay my bills or reimburse me for the towing fees your petty enforcement cost me. Find someone else." She didn't respond after that, but the group chat exploded with activity. Other board members were chiming in, some supporting Patricia's position, others questioning the wisdom of the towing. Residents were taking sides, arguing about rules versus common sense, property values versus emergency response. It was a mess, and I wanted no part of it. Tuesday morning brought crystal clear skies and temperatures that stayed well below freezing, which meant all that snow was going to stick around for a while. I made myself breakfast and watched through my window as people attempted to dig out their cars with varying degrees of success. A few hardy souls were trying to walk to the main entrance, which was over a mile away, to reach the county road that had been plowed overnight. My phone rang around 10. It was Patricia again. "Quentin, I've been thinking about our situation, and I want to propose a compromise." "I'm listening." "What if the board agreed to reimburse you for the towing fees? Not as payment for services, but as a goodwill gesture. Then you could retrieve your truck and help the community, and everyone wins. So you pay me $450 to get back my own truck that you had towed illegally. And then I'm supposed to donate 10 hours of work that's worth $1,000. I wouldn't characterize the towing as illegal. It was within the board's authority under the bylaws." "Amanda Chen might disagree with you on that." Another pause. "You spoke to a lawyer." "I spoke to a paralegal who seems to think I've got a pretty solid case against the HOA. Something about emergency declarations and reasonable accommodation. But I'm not interested in suing anyone, Patricia. I just want to do my job." "Then help us. Please. People are getting desperate. Mrs. Chen's daughter had to call an ambulance last night because her blood pressure medication ran out and she had an episode. The ambulance got stuck trying to reach our development and had to approach from the rear access road. It took them 40 minutes instead of 10. Someone could die because of these conditions. I felt a pang of guilt, even though I knew logically that none of this was my fault. Here's my counteroffer. The HOA pays the towing fees and my full rate for clearing the roads, $1,000 plus the $450 for the tow. I'll work today and get everything cleared, and we can call it even. I told you I can't authorize that expenditure without a board vote. Then emergency call a board vote. You have email and phones. Figure it out. 2 board members are unreachable. They're on a cruise with limited connectivity. That sounds like a planning problem on your end. Look, Patricia, I'm not doing this out of spite. I run a business. I have expenses and bills and clients who rely on me. You created this situation by choosing to enforce a rule at the worst possible time. You can fix it by following your own procedures to authorize the spending, or you can keep asking me to work for free. But I'm telling you right now, that's not happening. She was quiet for a long moment. I'll see what I can do. She hung up, and I went back to documenting everything for Amanda. I was starting to think a lawsuit might be inevitable, and I wanted to be prepared. Around noon, Mike knocked on my door with news. The county sent a plow through the main entrance, he said. They cleared enough that people can get out to the county road if they can make it down the development streets. Some of us are trying to organize a group effort to at least dig out a single-lane path. With shovels, it's all we've got. Patricia is claiming her hands are tied on hiring you. People are pissed, Quentin. Really pissed. There's talk of calling for a special election to remove her from the board. That would take months, wouldn't it? Probably. But right now people are angry enough to start the process. Are you sure you won't just help? I know it's not fair to ask, but we're kind of out of options. I wanted to help. I genuinely did. But I also knew that if I caved now, Patricia would learn that she could push people around and they'd eventually fold. The principle mattered more than the convenience. I can't, Mike. I'm sorry. If I do this for free, I'm telling Patricia and every other HOA board in the country that they can violate people's rights and then guilt them into fixing the consequences. That's not a precedent I'm willing to set. He nodded slowly. I get it. I don't like it, but I get it. After he left, I spent the afternoon doing paperwork and making calls to reschedule my clients for later in the week. The financial hit from losing 2 days of prime plowing time was going to hurt, but there was nothing I could do about it. My truck was 12 miles away, and without clear roads, I had no way to retrieve it. That evening, everything changed. I got a call from a number I didn't recognize with a 218 area code. Mr. Norris. This is Chief Deputy Walsh with the St. Louis County Sheriff's Office. I'm calling about a complaint we received regarding your HOA and the towing of your vehicle during the declared state of emergency. I didn't file a complaint. It was actually filed by a resident named Margaret Chen. She's claiming that the HOA's actions may have constituted reckless endangerment by deliberately removing emergency snow clearing equipment during a blizzard. Given that we had an ambulance delayed by 40 minutes last night trying to reach your development, we're taking this seriously. What happens now? I need to gather some information from you first. Can you walk me through exactly what happened and when? I spent the next hour on the phone with Deputy Walsh, explaining the timeline of events and providing him with copies of all the documentation I had gathered. He listened carefully and asked detailed questions about the HOA's authority, the bylaws, and Patricia's statements. This is helpful, he said finally. We're going to open an investigation. In the meantime, I'm going to contact Riverside Towing and arrange for your vehicle to be released without charge. The towing appears to have been improper given the timing and the emergency declaration. You can do that. The state of emergency gives law enforcement broader authority to commandeer or relocate resources needed for public safety. Your plow truck qualifies. Expect a call from the towing company within the hour. I was stunned. Thank you, Deputy. Don't thank me yet. This investigation is going to take some time, and I can't promise any particular outcome. But between you and me, if someone dies because a HOA president was more concerned with parking rules than public safety during a blizzard, that's going to be a problem. The towing company called 30 minutes later and told me my truck would be delivered to my address free of charge by 8 a.m. the next morning. The dispatcher sounded confused and annoyed, but she confirmed that they had received orders from the sheriff's office to release the vehicle immediately. I sat in my living room, processing what had just happened. Margaret Chen had escalated this to law enforcement, and now Patricia was potentially facing criminal charges. Part of me felt vindicated. Another part felt uneasy about how far this had spiraled. My phone buzzed with a text from Patricia. I just received a call from a sheriff's deputy asking questions about the towing. Did you file a criminal complaint against me? No, but someone did. This is outrageous. I was following the bylaws as written. There was no criminal intent. You deliberately removed emergency equipment during a declared state of emergency. What did you think would happen? I need you to call the sheriff's office and tell them this was a misunderstanding. This could ruin my reputation. I stared at that message for a long time before responding. You made your choices, Patricia. I'm not going to lie to protect you from the consequences. She tried calling after that, but I didn't answer. The group chat was going absolutely insane with rumors and speculation. Someone had leaked that the sheriff's office was investigating the HOA, and people were choosing sides. Some residents were defending Patricia, arguing that she was just following rules and didn't deserve criminal charges. Others were furious that it had taken a law enforcement investigation to get any action on the snow removal. I tried to stay out of it, but Mike called me around 9 p.m. Quentin, there's a mob forming outside Patricia's house. Not literally, but there's about 30 people standing in her front yard demanding answers. You should probably stay away, but I thought you'd want to know. Is anyone being violent? No, just loud. Patricia called the police, but they told her that people have a right to peacefully assemble on HOA property. She's freaking out. I didn't feel good about any of this. Yes, Patricia had been unreasonable and petty. Yes, her actions had created a dangerous situation. But I had never wanted to see her publicly humiliated or potentially facing criminal charges. I had just wanted to do my job. Wednesday morning arrived with my truck being delivered at 7:30, a full half-hour early. The driver helped me get it positioned in my driveway and had me sign some release paperwork that referenced the sheriff's office order. By 8 a.m., I was warming up the engine and getting ready to start clearing roads. My phone rang. It was Patricia, and her voice was completely different from our previous conversations. She sounded exhausted and scared. Quentin, please. I know I handled this badly. I made mistakes, but I'm trying to fix them. Can you please clear the roads? Are you asking me to volunteer or are you hiring me? I'll pay you. Whatever your rate is. I'll figure out the board approval later. People need help and I need to show the sheriff's office that I'm taking this seriously. Okay, I'll send you an invoice when I'm done. Thank you. Really. Thank you. I started with the main road that ran through the center of the development, working my way from the entrance back toward the residential streets. It felt good to be doing actual work again, instead of sitting around documenting drama. The plow cut through the snow cleanly, pushing massive piles to the sides and revealing the pavement underneath. People came out of their houses to watch, some waving, others taking photos. By noon, I had cleared the main road and started on the side streets. It was slow going because cars were buried everywhere, blocking access and forcing me to navigate carefully around them. Some residents saw me coming and rushed out to move their vehicles, which helped. Others weren't home, and I had to work around them. I took a break around 2 p.m. to refuel and grab lunch. Mike brought me a sandwich and a thermos of coffee. "You're a hero today," he said. "Everyone's talking about how you came through despite everything Patricia did." "I'm not a hero. I'm just doing my job, and Patricia is paying me, by the way." I heard. She sent out a message saying she was authorizing emergency expenditure of HOA funds. Some people are saying she's trying to save face before the sheriff's investigation gets too deep. Maybe. Or maybe she realized that people's safety is more important than rules. "You're more generous than I would be." I worked until almost 7 p.m., clearing every street in the development, including the cul-de-sacs and the visitor parking areas. My back ached and my hands were sore from gripping the wheel for 11 hours straight, but the job was done. The development was accessible again. People could get to work, to the store, to the pharmacy. Life could return to normal. I sent Patricia an invoice for $1,200, which included the full day of work plus fuel and equipment costs. She paid it within an hour via electronic transfer, along with a short message. "Thank you for your professionalism. I hope we can move past this." I didn't respond. I was too tired, and I wasn't sure what there was to say. The sheriff's investigation continued over the next 2 weeks. Deputy Walsh interviewed multiple residents, reviewed the HOA bylaws and meeting minutes, and examined the timeline of events. He called me twice more for clarification on specific details. The final report, which was released to the public due to the nature of the complaint, concluded that while Patricia's actions had been ill-advised and potentially negligent, they didn't rise to the level of criminal reckless endangerment. The report noted that she had no way of knowing that an emergency would occur requiring ambulance access, and that her enforcement of the bylaws, while poorly timed, was within her authority as HOA president. However, the report also included a strong recommendation that the HOA revise its bylaws to include emergency exceptions for essential equipment and services. It noted that rigid enforcement of parking restrictions during a declared state of emergency could constitute a public safety hazard and might expose the HOA to civil liability. Patricia resigned from the HOA board 3 days after the report was released. She sent a brief email to the community citing personal reasons and a desire to step back from leadership responsibilities. Nobody believed it was voluntary, but she maintained that fiction publicly. The board held a special election and elected a new president named Tom Davidson, a retired civil engineer who immediately proposed a complete overhaul of the bylaws. The first change he pushed through was an exemption for commercial vehicles owned by residents who operated licensed businesses, provided the vehicles were properly maintained and not creating safety hazards. Margaret Chen made a point of visiting me a week after the election. "I hope I didn't overstep by filing that complaint," she said. "I was just so angry about what happened, and when the ambulance got delayed, I couldn't just sit by. You did the right thing. Someone needed to hold her accountable. My daughter tells me you could have sued the HOA for damages." Loss of income, emotional distress, that sort of thing. I thought about it, but honestly, I just wanted this to be over. Patricia's gone, the bylaws are changing, and I can park my truck in peace. That's enough for me. "You're a good man, Quentin. This community is lucky to have you." Life did return to normal after that, though the winter remained brutal. We had 2 more major snowstorms in February, and both times I was out clearing the development roads without any drama or interference. The new board even voted to put me on a retainer contract, paying me a flat fee each month to guarantee priority service for the community whenever significant snow hit. I ran into Patricia once at the grocery store in March. She looked smaller somehow, less confident. We made brief eye contact, and she nodded slightly before turning away. I nodded back. There was nothing to say. She had learned an expensive lesson about the difference between authority and judgment, and I had learned that sometimes standing your ground is more important than being agreeable. The following November, when HOA elections came around again, people approached me about running for the board. I declined. I had no interest in the politics or the meetings or the inevitable personality conflicts that came with trying to govern a neighborhood. I was content to be the guy with the plow truck, showing up when needed and staying out of the drama the rest of the time. But I did start paying more attention to the bylaws and attending the occasional HOA meeting when they were discussing changes that might affect me. I had learned that indifference was a luxury I couldn't afford. These rules, as arbitrary as they sometimes seemed, had real consequences for real people. Someone needed to be paying attention to make sure common sense didn't get completely buried under procedure. Mike remained a good friend and neighbor. His wife Sandra joined the HOA board and became a voice for reasonable enforcement and practical solutions. They had learned, as many of us had, that rules needed to serve the community, not the other way around. The story should have ended there, a neat conclusion to a frustrating situation. But in late December, almost exactly a year after the blizzard incident, I got a call from an attorney representing Patricia Henderson. "Mr. Norris, my client is filing a defamation lawsuit against you and several other residents of Maple Ridge Estates. She believes her reputation was unfairly damaged by false statements made during and after the incident involving your vehicle." I sat down heavily. What false statements? Everything I said was documented and verified. My client disputes the characterization of her actions as negligent or reckless. She believes you and others engaged in a coordinated campaign to force her resignation through public humiliation and false accusations. She resigned voluntarily. She said so in her email. That's one of the issues we'll be addressing in the lawsuit. My client felt coerced into resigning due to the hostile environment created by your actions and statements. The lawsuit was filed on January 3rd, naming me, Margaret Chen, Mike Rodriguez, and Sandra Rodriguez as defendants. Patricia was seeking damages for defamation, intentional infliction of emotional distress, and loss of reputation. The amount requested was $250,000. I called Amanda Chen immediately. She had since passed the bar exam and was working as a full attorney. "This is classic SLAPP lawsuit behavior," she explained. "Strategic lawsuit against public participation. She's trying to punish you for speaking out and exercising your rights. Minnesota has anti-SLAPP statutes that should protect you, but you're going to need proper legal representation. How much is this going to cost me? I can't represent you personally because my mother is a co-defendant, but I can refer you to someone excellent. And if we can get this dismissed under anti-SLAPP provisions, Patricia might end up paying your attorney fees." She connected me with Robert Kirkland, a litigation attorney in Duluth who specialized in HOA disputes and free speech issues. He reviewed the lawsuit and actually laughed when he got to Patricia's claims. "This is one of the weakest defamation cases I've ever seen," he said. "You made truthful statements about documented events. The sheriff's investigation verified your account. She's got nothing. So why file it? Revenge, most likely. or she's being advised by someone who doesn't know Minnesota law very well. Either way, we're going to file a motion to dismiss under the anti-SLAPP statute. I'd say you've got an 80% chance of getting this tossed before it ever sees a courtroom. The next 3 months were stressful despite Robert's confidence. Being sued, even for something frivolous, was invasive and upsetting. I had to provide depositions, gather more documentation, and spend hours reviewing legal filings. The other defendants were going through the same process, and we formed an informal support group, meeting for coffee every few weeks to commiserate and share updates. The hearing on the motion to dismiss was scheduled for early April. Robert had prepared a comprehensive brief arguing that all our statements were protected speech about matters of public concern, that the statements were substantially true, and that Patricia couldn't demonstrate actual malice or knowing falsehood. He also argued that she was a limited public figure due to her role as HOA president, which required her to meet a higher burden of proof for defamation. I attended the hearing with the other defendants. Patricia was there with her attorney, a middle-aged man in an expensive suit who looked distinctly uncomfortable. The judge, a no-nonsense woman named Justice Ellen Winters, had clearly read all the briefs and supporting documents. She didn't waste time. "Counselor," she addressed Patricia's attorney, "I've reviewed your complaint and the defendant's motion to dismiss. I'm troubled by several aspects of your case. Can you explain to me how your client can claim defamation when the defendant's statements were verified by a law enforcement investigation?" "Your Honor, the investigation concluded that Mrs. Henderson's actions didn't constitute criminal behavior. That contradicts the defendant's claims that she acted recklessly or negligently. The investigation concluded there wasn't sufficient evidence for criminal charges. That's not the same as saying her actions were appropriate or reasonable. The report itself recommended policy changes specifically because of concerns about public safety. That seems to support the defendant's characterization of events." Patricia's attorney fumbled for a response. "The defendants engaged in a coordinated effort to publicly humiliate my client and force her resignation. That goes beyond protected speech." Robert stood. "Your Honor, if I may, the defendants exercised their right to participate in HOA governance and to communicate about matters affecting their community. Mrs. Henderson held a position of public responsibility within the development. She made decisions that affected dozens of families during an emergency. The defendants had every right to discuss those decisions, criticize them, and seek her removal through proper channels." "That's my reading as well," Judge Winters said. She flipped through some papers on her bench. "I'm granting the defendant's motion to dismiss. This lawsuit clearly falls under Minnesota's anti-SLAPP statute. The defendants made truthful statements about matters of public concern, and Mrs. Henderson has failed to demonstrate any likelihood of success on her claims. Furthermore, I'm awarding attorney fees and costs to the defendants under the statute." Patricia's face went pale. Her attorney tried to interject, but Judge Winters cut him off. "Counselor, you should have advised your client more carefully before filing this action. Defamation law is complex, and cases involving public officials or public figures face significant constitutional protections. The Supreme Court established in New York Times v. Sullivan that public figures must demonstrate actual malice, which your client hasn't come close to doing. This case never should have been filed." The hearing ended, and we walked out of the courthouse into bright spring sunshine. Margaret Chen was crying with relief. Mike and Sandra were hugging. I just felt exhausted. "How much do you think the attorney fees will be?" I asked Robert. For all 4 defendants combined, probably $40,000 to $50,000. The judge will review our billing records and determine a reasonable amount. Patricia's going to be writing some big checks." "Good," Margaret said fiercely. "Maybe it will teach her to stop using the legal system to bully people." 2 weeks later, Judge Winters issued a formal order awarding $42,000 in attorney fees and costs to be paid by Patricia. She also issued a written opinion that was published in the state legal reporters, establishing precedent for similar cases in Minnesota. Robert told me the opinion was being cited in law school classes as an example of proper anti-SLAPP analysis. Patricia filed for bankruptcy 6 months later. The attorney fees, combined with her legal costs from the failed lawsuit, had apparently wiped out her savings. Her husband left her shortly after, filing for divorce and citing the legal debacle as evidence of her poor judgment and financial irresponsibility. She moved out of Maple Ridge Estates that fall, selling her house at a loss to get out from under the HOA and the neighborhood where everyone knew her story. I felt a strange mix of emotions when I heard she was gone. Part of me was relieved to no longer worry about running into her or dealing with any lingering hostility. Another part felt bad about how completely her life had unraveled. Yes, she had been petty and power-hungry. Yes, she had made a terrible decision that created real problems for real people. But the consequences had been severe, arguably more severe than her actions warranted. "Don't waste your sympathy," Amanda told me when I expressed these thoughts. "She made a series of bad choices. She didn't have to tow your truck. She didn't have to refuse to fix the problem. And she definitely didn't have to file a frivolous lawsuit to punish people for calling her out. Every step of the way, she had opportunities to make better decisions, and she chose not to. I know. I just don't like seeing anyone's life fall apart, even someone who caused me grief." "That's because you're a decent person, Quentin. Patricia could have learned from your example. Instead, she learned the hard way that actions have consequences." The new HOA board, under Tom Davidson's leadership, had completely transformed the culture of Maple Ridge Estates. The revised bylaws included clear emergency exceptions, a streamlined approval process for necessary expenditures, and a dispute resolution procedure that required mediation before legal action. Tom implemented a monthly newsletter highlighting community members and their businesses, including a feature article about my snow removal service. The development actually felt like a community now, instead of a collection of houses governed by arbitrary rules. People knew their neighbors. They looked out for each other. When the next major snowstorm hit in January, I had the roads cleared within hours, and residents organized to help each other dig out driveways and check on elderly neighbors. Mike and Sandra had their first child that spring, a baby girl they named Emma. I was honored when they asked me to be her godfather. The baptism was held at a small church in Duluth, followed by a party at their house where half the neighborhood showed up with gifts and well wishes. Standing in their backyard, watching people laugh and talk and celebrate together, I reflected on how much had changed in such a short time. A year and a half ago, this development had been on the verge of tearing itself apart over parking restrictions and procedural rules. Patricia had ruled through fear and rigid enforcement, creating an atmosphere of resentment and anger. Now, we had leaders who understood that community was about people, not rules. We had systems in place to handle disagreements without destroying relationships. And we had learned, collectively, that sometimes standing up to unreasonable authority was necessary, even when it was uncomfortable. My business had grown significantly as word spread about how I had handled the blizzard situation. Other HOAs in the area started calling me, asking about snow removal contracts and emergency service agreements. Some even asked for my input on their bylaws, wanting to avoid the mistakes Maple Ridge Estates had made. I found myself in the strange position of being a consultant on HOA governance, despite having no formal training or expertise beyond my own experience. "You've got something better than training," Tom told me when I expressed doubt about offering advice. "You've got perspective. You understand what it's like to be on the receiving end of overreach and bad policy. That's valuable." I eventually created a simple checklist that I shared with HOA boards I worked with. It included things like emergency exceptions for essential services, reasonable enforcement procedures, transparent communication, and proper approval processes for expenditures. It was common sense stuff, but apparently common sense wasn't that common in the world of HOA governance. The second anniversary of the blizzard incident came and went without much fanfare. I cleared several major storms that winter, and the system worked exactly as it should. The HOA board approved expenditures promptly. Residents cooperated with snow clearing operations, and nobody's truck got towed for arbitrary reasons. I did think about Patricia sometimes, wondering where she had ended up and whether she had learned anything from the experience. Mike mentioned once that she was living in an apartment complex in Superior, Wisconsin, just across the border, working at a retail job. No more HOA presidency, no more authority over her neighbors, just an ordinary life keeping her head down. Maybe that was punishment enough. Or maybe it was what she had needed all along, to be just another person instead of someone with power over others. Some people handle authority well, using it to serve and improve their communities. Others let it corrupt them, turning them into petty tyrants who care more about control than common sense. The whole experience taught me several important lessons. First, that community rules should serve the community, not exist for their own sake. Second, that speaking up against unreasonable authority is worth the temporary discomfort and conflict. Third, that documentation and truth are your best defense when someone tries to abuse their power. And finally, that most people are basically decent and will support you when you stand up for what's right, even if it takes them a while to find their courage. My plow truck still sits in my driveway during winter months, a visible reminder of everything that happened. New residents sometimes ask about it, and I tell them the story. Most react with disbelief that an HOA would tow emergency equipment during a blizzard. Some ask if I'm worried about it happening again. No, I always tell them. We've got good people running things now. And if someone ever tries to pull that again, I know exactly what to do. The truth is, I hope it never comes to that. I hope the lessons learned during that blizzard stick with this community for years to come. I hope future board members remember Patricia's story as a cautionary tale about what happens when you prioritize rules over people, when you let power go to your head, when you forget that leadership is about service, not control. As for me, I'm content to keep doing what I do. Clearing snow in winter, maintaining properties in other seasons, and staying involved enough in HOA meetings to make sure common sense prevails. I'm not a hero or an activist or a crusader. I'm just a guy with a plow truck who learned that sometimes the most important thing you can do is stand your ground and refuse to let unreasonable people push you around. The blizzard that nearly tore apart Maple Ridge Estates ended up making it stronger. We learned who we were as a community, what we valued, and how we wanted to be governed. We learned that bad leadership can create crisis, but good people working together can overcome almost anything. And most importantly, we learned that even in the middle of a snowstorm, even when everything seems impossible and people are acting crazy. Doing the right thing matters more than taking the easy path. Patricia learned that lesson the hard way. The rest of us learned it by watching her mistakes and choosing differently. Every time I fire up my plow truck and head out to clear another storm, I think about that. I think about the choice between convenience and principle, between going along to get along and standing up for what's right. And I remember that sometimes the most important battles aren't fought with lawyers and lawsuits and dramatic confrontations. Sometimes they're fought by simply refusing to give in to unreasonable demands, even when it costs you something, even when people criticize you for it. The roads are clear now, both literally and figuratively. My truck sits ready for the next storm, properly maintained and legally parked in my own driveway, where it belongs. The HOA runs smoothly under sensible leadership. The community thrives because people care about each other more than they care about petty rules. And if another Patricia Henderson ever shows up and tries to take us backward, we'll be ready. Because we've been there before, and we know exactly what it costs to let petty tyrants go unchallenged. We know what happens when you prioritize rules over reason, when you forget that communities are made of people who deserve respect and common sense. That knowledge, earned through one terrible winter storm and its aftermath, is something this community will carry forward for years to come. And that, more than anything else, makes the whole ordeal worth it.